What happens when Hollywood's most stone-faced action icon, a man whose very brand is built on icy focus and unyielding self-control, gets blindsided on live television by a host determined to poke, prod, and provoke him into losing his cool? What follows isn't just another awkward celebrity interview. It's a spark hitting dry gasoline. It's the moment when years of polite composure are pushed past their limit, and when a daytime TV host finally discovers that needling the wrong person can come with consequences. That's where the story starts. Get ready, as the shift is jaw-dropping. This is the story of how Jason Statham, anticipating nothing more than a routine promotional appearance, stepped onto the set of The View and ended up doling out one of the most unexpected verbal counterstrikes to ever hit daytime television. No shouting. No theatrics. Not even a raised voice. Just controlled, razor-sharp dismantling, leaving in its wake stunned silence. But before we get to the moment everything exploded, let's take a step back and understand precisely what was unfolding. This isn't just an actor defending his filmography. This is a showcase of the uncomfortable tension that seeped into modern celebrity interviews, whereby criticism masquerades as conversation, and provocation mistakes itself for journalism. After hundreds of appearances marked by professionalism, patience, and politeness, Jason finally reached his threshold. And viewers watched, spellbound, as someone long targeted by abrasive questioning decided to fight back with precision instead of pleasantries. Now here's where the story gets really irresistible, because what happened next became legendary. The showdown between Statham and Joy Behar didn't go viral for shouting matches or dramatic exits. It is memorable because millions of people watched a quiet storm overpower a manufactured one. Calm logic overpowering forced hostility. A man known for understated intensity calmly pulling apart a bully's tactics until there was nothing left but stunned silence. So let's rewind to the morning everything started, since the setup was deceptively ordinary. Jason arrived at the studio with the same disciplined routine he'd followed for years. Early call time. Briefing with producers. Makeup. Microphone. Walk on stage. Smile. Answer the expected questions. Promote the movie. Shake hands. Leave. Efficient. Predictable. Professional. The exact environment where his grounded, no-nonsense presence always thrived. The audience greeted him with genuine enthusiasm, a warm welcome for the man who'd carried global franchises, delivered unforgettable stunts, and built an action legacy rooted in grit rather than flash. And its opening seconds matched that energy. Whoopi Goldberg offered a polite introduction. Sarah Haynes greeted him with sincerity. Sonny Hostin acknowledged him with professional warmth. Everything flowed the way it always did on a promotional circuit. And then, like a record-scratching mid-song, the whole vibe changed. Joy Behar leaned forward with her signature smirk, the one that longtime viewers knew was the warning sign before an edgy question. She didn't ease into it. She didn't soften it. She went straight for the insult. "So Jason," she said, voice dripping with performative curiosity, "I've got to ask, your films are pretty much just violence porn at this point, aren't they? Seriously, when are you going to make something with actual depth?" The other hosts went stiff. Eyes widened. Breath caught. This wasn't a question, it was a strike, quick, sharp, and provocatively so. Delivered not 2 minutes into the interview. Jason didn't flinch. He didn't tense. He didn't even blink. He simply leaned back, one eyebrow rising in a gesture so subtle, so controlled, it said more than any outburst ever could. That small move was where everything started to change. Jason's face didn't twist or flare with emotion, but something in his expression shifted just enough for anyone familiar with his on-screen intensity to recognize. A slight clench in his jaw. A narrowing of the eyes. Micro-reactions that signaled one thing: the shot had landed. He'd endured criticism before, shrugged off snide remarks about action cinema, but being labeled violence porn moments into a live interview was a line step he hadn't encountered at this scale. And that's the moment everyone watching sensed the temperature in the room starting to change. "Well, Joy," Jason began, his London accent even smoother than usual, the control in his voice almost unnervingly steady. "That seems like a very limited way to look at my work. These films don't appear out of thin air. They employ 1,000 stunt teams, camera crews, designers, artists. They connect with millions worldwide. They tell stories about loyalty, about sacrifice, about standing up for something bigger than yourself. Hard to see how any of that fits the word you used. It was the perfect response, defensive without sounding wounded, firm without crossing over into retaliation. Most guests would have stopped right there, taken the high road, and made an attempt to pivot to the movie plug. That's the path the industry trains them to take. But this time, the high road wasn't the direction in which the conversation was headed, not with Joy behind the wheel. She leaned in, chin lifted, voice taking on that signature tone she pulled out when she knew she had the higher ground. "Come on, Jason," she said, waving a dismissive hand. "Your characters drive fast cars, throw punches, and explode things. Where's the art? Where's the commentary? Don't you think you should use your platform for something a bit more meaningful?" Whoopi shifted in her seat and tried to intervene, sensing the oncoming collision. "Joy, maybe we should." But Jason lifted a hand, not rude, not abrupt, just enough to signal, "I've got this." His jaw had tightened further. It was the first undeniable sign that Joy's provocation had struck a nerve. "No, it's all right," he said, eyes fixed on Joy. "I'd actually like to hear more about your definition of meaningful entertainment." And in that instant, a subtle hook snapped into place, Jason's trap, hidden beneath impeccable calm. Joy walked straight into it, confident in her own rhythm. "Well, for starters," she continued, savoring what she believed was her momentum, "maybe try making something that doesn't glorify toxic masculinity. Your characters are always these hyper-macho men solving problems with their fists. Isn't that a dangerous message for young boys watching?" The studio froze. The audience held its breath. Even the camera operators paused with that instinctual awareness that something unprecedented was unfolding. In the wings, Jason's publicist looked ready to vault onto the stage and drag him out by force. "Toxic masculinity," Jason echoed, his voice dropping to a level so calm it bordered on chilling. The volume dropped, but the intensity doubled. "That's interesting coming from someone who's built a career out of tearing people down on national television." Joy's eyes flashed. She hadn't expected him to strike back, not like that, not with precision instead of anger. "Excuse me," she snapped. "I think you're confusing holding people accountable with attacking them." Jason's response was quiet enough to make the surrounding silence even heavier. "Holding people accountable," he said, "is very different from spending 20 minutes dismantling someone's life's work without the slightest understanding of what goes into it." And with that line clean, sharp, and controlled, the balance in the room shifted. Sarah Haynes jumped in, all but waving the white flag. "Maybe we can talk about your stunts, Jason. I heard you do most of them yourself." But Joy was not finished. She smelled blood and confused it with weakness. She pressed the attack, as if on instinct, the very instinct that, throughout her career, brought her applause and controversy in equal measure. "Oh, I know plenty about your movies," she said, her voice dripping with theatrical disdain. "I know they make billions selling the fantasy that violence fixes everything. I know they reinforce harmful stereotypes about masculinity." And right there, mid-sentence, mid-strike, the tension reached its peak. The air thickened, the audience leaned forward. The next moment would determine everything. And then Joy delivered the line that pushed everything past the point of no return. "I know intelligent actors like you could choose to do better." That was it. The moment the interview crossed into territory that couldn't be undone. She hadn't just criticized his film, she'd questioned his integrity, belittled his fans, and implied his intelligence was being squandered. And she delivered it with that same performative confidence she'd used on countless guests before him, certain he'd swallow the insult like everyone else. But Jason Statham wasn't everyone else. And Joy had finally pushed a man famous for calm composure far enough that the mask began to crack. Jason's hands clenched tighter. The camera captured the tension in his shoulders, the shift in his breathing, the microscopic signs of a man who had reached the outer edge of his patience. "Intelligence," he repeated, almost whispering it. The word landed with such weight that the background noise in the studio fell silent. That's interesting coming from someone who just implied action films have no artistic value and that millions of people around the world are too stupid to tell entertainment from reality. "I never said they were stupid," Joy protested, but her voice wasn't as confident as before. She could feel it, the balance of power starting to tip. "Right," Jason said, his voice taking on a sharp edge. "So the problem isn't the audience. It's me. Because I make movies people actually want to see rather than pretentious arthouse creations 12 people see in a back-alley cinema." Sunny Hostin tried desperately to mediate. "I think what Joy means is..." "I can speak for myself," Joy snapped, her gaze still accusingly fixed on Jason. "What I am saying is actors of your caliber have choices. You could use your influence to challenge people, to make them think, to address some very real social issues. But you don't. You take the easy money and make the same mindless action movies again and again." The word mindless hit the room like a grenade. Jason was no longer the low-key, composed guest who had walked onto the set half an hour earlier. The way he sat, his facial expression, his entire demeanor changed. A storm had been brewing quietly until now it was seconds away from breaking. Then he got up. The audience gasped. Even the hosts froze. Nobody stands up during the view. Not during a live interview. Not unless something serious has changed. But Jason Statham rose to his full height, a tower of controlled intensity, and the whole studio felt smaller. "Let me tell you something about mindless, Joy," he said, his voice even but laced with undeniable force. "Mindless is sitting behind a desk every day taking cheap shots at people who actually create something. Mindless is believing your opinions matter more than the millions of people who choose to watch these films with their families." Joy's face reddened, but she held her chin high. "Sit down, Jason. You're being ridiculous." "Am I?" Jason stayed standing, his presence dominating the set. "Because from where I'm standing, this wasn't an interview, it was an ambush. You invited me on your show, then spent 10 minutes insulting my work, my choices, and by extension every fan who's ever supported me." Whoopi tried again, her voice tight with urgency. "All right, everybody, deep breath, let's just calm." "No, Whoopi," Jason said, his eyes never leaving Joy. "She wanted this conversation. So let's have it." The air tightened. Each person in the studio leaned forward without knowing it. "Joy," he continued, "what exactly have you contributed to entertainment? What lasting mark have you left besides sitting at a table criticizing people who actually build something?" Joy's jaw dropped. Not one of these guests, absolutely none, had ever spoken to her this way. Not here. Not on her turf. "I've been in this business longer than you've been alive, you arrogant." Being in the business and contributing to it, Jason cut in, calm, lethal, are two very different things. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't move. He didn't need to. "I've created characters people admire. I've helped make films that bring families together in cinemas. I've worked alongside stunt crews and filmmakers who innovate, who push the boundaries of what cinema can be." And with that, the storm finally broke. Jason didn't raise his voice, but the weight of his words hung in the air much louder than any yell. "What do you do, Joy?" he asked, his tone sharpened but in control. "You tear people down for a living." The other hosts exchanged panicked glances, silently begging the producers offstage for direction. This had gone far beyond an uncomfortable moment. It was entering territory where the control room might need to cut to commercial or even pull the plug on the interview altogether. Sarah Haynes once again attempted to salvage the sinking ship. "Jason, perhaps we could discuss some of your upcoming projects." "No, Sarah," Joy snapped, her voice cracking with anger and, perhaps, the sting of unexpected humiliation. Her face had gone a deep crimson, the kind that comes from realizing the person you tried to corner just flipped the entire dynamic. "I want to finish this conversation." She turned back to Jason, her glare now defiant. "You want to know what I contribute?" she demanded. "I hold people accountable. I ask the hard questions other interviewers are too scared to ask. I don't just sit here and let celebrities promote their garbage without challenging them." Jason let out a laugh, short, sharp, humorless. "Challenging them? Is that what this is?" he asked. "This isn't journalism. This is amateur hour armchair psychology dressed up as tough questioning. You think you're a hard-hitting analyst, but you're just a talk show provocateur who enjoys making people squirm. How dare you? Joy shot back, rising to her feet now, the veneer of composure fully shattered. I've spent decades asking important questions about society and culture. Just because you can't handle criticism doesn't make me wrong. Criticism. Jason repeated, disbelief coloring every syllable. You think calling someone's life's work violence porn and mindless is criticism? That isn't critique, Joy, that's cruelty. There's a difference between thoughtful analysis and mean-spirited attacks meant to inflate your own ego. Sunny Hostin raised a placating hand, her voice cautious. Maybe we're all getting a bit heated. Maybe we should. But Jason pressed onward, his voice returning to that unsettling concentrated intensity that commanded attention. You know what the real problem is, Joy. He said quietly, so quietly the entire room leaned in. You've spent so many years throwing stones from behind this desk that you've forgotten what it feels like to actually build something. To take risks. To put yourself out there and have real skin in the game. I put myself out there every day, Joy protested, though even she sounded unconvinced. Do you? Jason challenged. When's the last time you created something that could be judged? When's the last time you made yourself vulnerable? You sit here surrounded by safety, your panel, your format, your network. And from behind that shield you take aim at people who actually dare to make something real. That's not courage, Joy. That's cowardice. The words hit like punches, measured, precise, devastating. Joy's face contorted through a storm of emotions, anger, embarrassment, realization, then back to anger again. That's not fair. I never said. You said plenty, Jason snapped on. You called my work mindless. You implied I was irresponsible. You said I was wasting my talent. You accused me of contributing to societal problems while displaying the most toxic interviewing behavior I've experienced in my entire career. Now you want to pretend this wasn't an attack. The studio was silent, as if the air itself was holding onto its breath. Even the cameras didn't know where to focus, whether on Joy's trembling attempt to recover or Jason's stance that didn't change. I have the right to express my opinion, Joy finally managed, her earlier ferocity reduced to a fragile whisper. And I have the right, Jason replied, steady and unblinking, to call out your opinion for exactly what it is, uninformed, mean-spirited, and hypocritical. The shockwave of his words didn't just fill the studio, it swallowed it. Jason didn't waste any time. His words were razor-sharp, cutting through the strained atmosphere of the studio with incisiveness. You talk so much about toxic masculinity, he said. His tone was firm, unyielding. But what do you call using your platform to tear down a guest who has no equal footing to defend themselves? What do you call ambushing someone who came here expecting a fair, professional interview? The room tightened. Even the air seemed to pause. Joy's voice shrank to a fragile whisper. I wasn't ambushing anyone. Jason raised an eyebrow, not impressed. Then what would you call it? He pressed. Because from where I'm standing, it looks a lot like you planned the villain in today's narrative long before I walked through the door. A ripple of shock ran across the set. No one breathed. He shook his head, the disappointment in his demeanor palpable. Do you know what the real shame is, Joy? You had every opportunity to dive into a worthwhile conversation, the craft of acting, the evolution of action cinema, the collaboration with the directors, the real physical risks involved. There was so much we could have explored. He stopped himself, letting the unspoken words hang awkwardly. But you didn't want a conversation. You wanted a confrontation. Joy seized the moment, trying desperately to regain control. You're being unfair, Jason. I was only trying to. To what? He cut in sharply. To make a spectacle? To boost your credibility by cutting down mine? To twist the idea of masculinity into some televised power play where you get to look superior? Her face faltered. For the first time, the hurt was real, visible. But Jason wasn't finished. Far from it. You want to talk responsibility. He continued, the words slow and devastating. Then let's talk about yours. Your responsibility to treat guests like human beings. Your responsibility to your audience to create conversations worth having, not cheap theatrics. Your responsibility to yourself to be better than this petty performance you've put on today. The studio was frozen. No camera moved. No whisper dared. Jason stepped toward the edge of the set, in a calm manner that only added to the power of the moment, and unclipped his microphone. And most importantly, your responsibility to stop using your show as an outlet for your frustrations. Joy suddenly surged forward, panic creeping into her voice. Where are you going? We're not done. Jason stopped, turning around to regard her with a mixture of pity and exhaustion. Oh, we're done, he said quietly. We were done the second you chose to make this personal instead of professional. Then, he turned to the main camera, the one that reached millions. The hook tightened. Viewers at home leaned in. I came here to talk about my new movie, to connect with the people who support my work, and to have an honest, enjoyable conversation. Instead, I walked into a lesson on how not to conduct an interview. Joy sprang to her feet, voice cracking. You can't just leave, this is my show. Jason gave a cold, almost tragic smile. Then maybe it's time you start acting like the host, not the playground bully. Behind the cameras, chaos erupted. Production assistants waved frantically at one another, unsure whether to cut to commercial, end the segment, or simply let the moment burn. And the tension? It was volcanic, seconds away from erupting into broadcast history. Jason put his microphone into the hands of the astonished production assistant. The second time he spoke, his voice was softer, not with kindness, but a quiet pity that was far more damaging than anger. You know something, Joy? He said, nearly gently. I actually feel bad for you. It must be exhausting living with that much bitterness. It must be incredibly lonely, pushing away anyone who tries to have a real, human conversation with you. The voice of Joy wavered, thin and breaking. I'm not angry. I'm passionate, No, Jason said, the word landing with absolute certainty. You're angry. And instead of dealing with it, you're taking it out on people who don't deserve the blowback. That isn't passion, Joy. That's just sad. He turned to the other women at the table, Whoopi, Sarah, Sunny, and gave each a respectful nod. Thank you for trying to keep things respectful. I'm sorry your colleague made that impossible. And the hook tightened. The studio awaited what was to follow. As Jason walked towards the edge of the set, Joy made one last frantic grab for control, her voice rising with desperation. This right here is the toxic behavior I'm talking about. Walking away when challenged, refusing to answer difficult questions. Jason stopped. Slowly, deliberately. And when he turned back, his voice was so calm, so composed, it hit with twice the force. Joy, he said, the only toxic thing in this studio today was your conduct. The only person who refused to engage with meaningful questions was you. Because you never asked any. You threw insults and pretended they were journalism. Joy's expression cracked, and the effect was palpable for everyone present. And if anyone should be ashamed of what happened here, Jason continued, it's you. He didn't raise his voice. He did not move toward her. He simply delivered the truth with devastating composure. I really hope that someday you learn the difference between being challenging and being cruel. Your audience deserves that. Your guests deserve that. And honestly, he paused, and for a moment, it seemed like he really meant it, you deserve that, too. Then he walked off the set of The View, leaving behind a room so stunned it felt weightless. The hosts sat frozen. Joy looked smaller than she ever had on camera, shaken, cornered, and, for once, silent. The cameras rolled for a few extra seconds, capturing the moment she realized she had absolutely nothing left to say. And then the world saw it. The aftermath exploded instantly. In minutes, clips of the confrontation blanketed every platform: Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, with videos replaying for millions the moment Jason stood firm, the moment Joy's confidence cracked, the moment he delivered the final, unforgettable line. The audience reaction ignited into two fierce camps. Action movie fans cheered wildly, thrilled that finally someone had pushed back. "This is the first time anyone's called out these talk show bullies," declared one viral tweet. Others praised the restraint he showed. He dismantled her without yelling. That's real strength. But Joy's defenders fired back, arguing that she'd raised reasonable questions about violent media, and Jason had merely overreacted. "If you can't take criticism," one critic wrote, "don't go on talk shows." The entertainment world pounced. Every outlet rushed to cover the blow-up, to analyze the stare-downs, the tension, the power shift. And of course, the walk-off that had already become the clip of the day. Headlines hit the internet like shockwaves. Jason Statham walks off the View after explosive confrontation. Joy Behar left speechless as Statham defends action cinema. Within hours, every corner of the media ecosystem had grabbed hold of the moment. Opinion pieces sparked debates about the ethics of celebrity interviews, the growing problem of gotcha journalism, and whether Joy had crossed a professional boundary, or whether Jason had simply refused to play the game. But beneath all the noise, one sentiment rose to the surface again and again, echoed by fans and critics alike. Jason Statham was completely within his right to stand his ground. And Joy Behar, for the very first time in a long time, had been exposed as one who could throw punches freely but who then stumbled the moment one came back her way. This was no longer about the attempted takedown of action movies. This was a lesson in poise, integrity, and self-respect. Jason didn't meet aggression with aggression. He didn't shout. He didn't storm. Instead, he delivered something far more devastating: calm, razor-sharp logic, delivered with the precision of a seasoned professional who knew exactly what he stood for. It wasn't chaos. It wasn't theatrics. This was controlled fire. And that restraint made it hit harder than any dramatic outburst could have. He'd walked onto the set intending to talk about his new film. He walked off having reminded millions why he commands respect both on and off the screen. Because when British composure finally snaps, it doesn't explode, it cuts with cold, undeniable clarity. And that clarity left Joy Behar with nothing to deflect, nothing to spin, and nowhere to hide. The truth was simple, and the whole world had now seen it. Some people start wars they are not even remotely prepared to finish.